Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Fasna. My dissertation is titled From Bodily Autonomy to Epistemic Authority Rethinking Pro Choice Arguments Through Woollard. This study re-examines standard pro choice arguments and proposes a more comprehensive framework by incorporating lived experience. Research proposal. The abortion debate is largely dominated by bodily autonomy, which focus on the right to control one's body. However, this framework is inadequate in capturing the lived experience of pregnancy. So, I'm asking, is bodily autonomy alone sufficient? And does pregnancy generate epistemic authority, a special kind of knowledge? Objectives: to critically evaluate the autonomy based framework in pro-choice, to examine the transformative experience which is proposed by L.A. to analyze epistemic asymmetry and epistemic authority explained by Fiona Woollard. The aim is to develop a revised pro-choice model that combines rights with lived experience. So, my dissertation has 3 chapters: bodily autonomy and the standard pro-choice framework. Second one, epistemically transformative experience and epistemic asymmetry, Woolard's intervention. Third one, from autonomy to epistemic authority, regrounding pro-choice arguments. Chapter 1, bodily autonomy and the standard pro-choice framework. Bodily autonomy has become one of the central pillars of the pro-choice position regarding the debate on abortion. The central idea of bodily autonomy is that every individual is entitled to control their body. This idea has become the ground for modern discussion on reproductive rights and has been widely used to defend the justification of abortion, primarily within the liberal positions. Classical pro-choice arguments. The traditional pro-choice arguments in the abortion debate are widely grounded in a rights-based framework. The abortion debate is often framed in the terms of a clash between rights of the pregnant person and the moral position of the fetus. This part discusses 3 important areas of this approach: Thompson's thought experiment, conflict models as they apply to rights-based conflict, and autonomy and consent as they relate to determining whether it is morally permissible to use someone else's body. First, I begin with Judith Jarvis Thompson, who shifts the abortion debate away from the question, is the fetus a person, to a moral, practical question, does anyone have the right to use another person's body without consent? To explain this, she gives 2 important examples. The violinist analogy shows that even if someone's life depends on your body, you are not morally required to sustain them. For example, if you are forcibly connected to a violinist, you still have the right to disconnect. Then the burglar example addresses the responsibility. Even if you voluntarily open a window and a burglar enters, it does not mean you consented to their presence. Similarly, consenting to sex does not mean consenting to pregnancy. So, from these examples, Thompson establishes a key idea: bodily autonomy is central and no one has the right to use your body without consent. Now, this leads to the broader conflict model of the abortion debate. Here, abortion is understood as a conflict between 2 rights: the pregnant person's right to bodily autonomy and the fetus' claimed right to life. For example, as discussed by Peter Singer, the pro-life argument says it is wrong to kill an innocent human being, while the pro-choice side questions whether a fetus has full personhood. However, Thompson arguments shows that even if the fetus has a right to life, it does not automatically include the right to use another person's body. This brings us to the final step: autonomy and consent. Autonomy means the ability to make decisions about one's own body, and consent means agreeing freely without pressure. We already accept this in everyday life. For example, we cannot force someone to donate an organ even to save a life. Similarly, pregnancy involves the use of a person's body, so it must depend on their ongoing consent. Therefore, bodily autonomy and the consent form the moral foundation of pro-choice arguments. Strength and limitations of bodily autonomy. First, we can look at the strength. Legal clarity in policy making. Bodily autonomy provides a clear legal rule that individuals have control over their own bodies, making policy decisions straightforward. For example, under the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act in India, abortion is permitted based on the woman's choice within conditions without needing to settle when life begins. Robust protection against state and individual coercion. It strongly protects individuals from being forced by the state or others to use their bodies against their will. For example, just as no one can be forced to donate a kidney to save another person, a woman cannot be forced to continue a pregnancy. Independence from fetal personhood debate. This framework avoids the complex debate about whether the fetus is a person with full moral rights. For example, even if the fetus is considered a person, it still does not have the right to use another person's body without consent, as shown in the violinist analogy. Limitation. Bodily autonomy is a strong foundation for pro-choice arguments, but it is limited because it is too abstract and does not capture the real-life experience of pregnancy. For example, a married woman in India may legally have the right to abortion, but family pressure and lack of access to healthcare can prevent her from exercising that choice, showing a gap between legal and real autonomy. It also ignores emotional and relational factors such as women choosing abortion due to financial issues, yet feeling guilt or grief, or initially planning abortion but later continuing the pregnancy due to emotional attachment, highlighting that decisions are not purely based on individual choice. Therefore, bodily autonomy alone cannot fully explain reproductive decision making and leaves an epistemic gap. So, this epistemic gap, which means a gap in knowledge or understanding, especially between what can be known in theory and what can only be known through lived experience. Fiona Woollard addressed this through epistemic authority, arguing that pregnant person has unique first-person knowledge that others cannot fully access, while Lepol explains pregnancy. Lepol explains pregnancy as a transformative experience that changes one's value, identity, and priorities. Chapter 2. Epistemically transformative experience and epistemic asymmetry, Woolard's intervention. First, we can look at Lepol's narrow epistemic experience. Lepol explains that some decisions involve transformative experience where we cannot fully know what the experience will be like until we actually live it through, making rational decisions difficult. These experiences are both epistemically transformative. They give new knowledge only through experience, and personally transformative, that they change our values, identities, and priorities. For example, becoming a parent or going through pregnancy cannot be fully understood in advance. Someone may plan their life around career goals, but after experiencing pregnancy or parenthood, their priorities and sense of self may change in unexpected ways. This shows that such decisions are made under uncertainty, as individuals cannot predict how they will feel or they will become, which is why transformative experience challenge the idea that we can make fully informed, rational choices beforehand. It focuses only on gaining new knowledge that is possible only through direct experience without necessarily including changes in value or identity. In the other words, it is narrow because it limited to what you come to know, not who you become. Example, you can read about what it feels like to be a pregnant or tasting a new fruit, but you only truly know the experience when you go through it yourself. This new first-hand knowledge is what makes it a narrow epistemic transformation. Woolard's extension. Fiona Woollard extends Lepol by arguing that experiences like pregnancy are wide epistemic transformation because they do not give new knowledge but also reshape a person's values, identity, relationships, and perspective. It is called wide because the change is not limited to what one knows but includes how one feels, what one values, and how one understands life itself. Value shaping. Fiona Woollard explains that pregnancy can reshape a person's value without priorities such as career or independence shifting toward the well-being of the child. For example, a career-focused woman may begin to value emotional attachment and caregiving more as the pregnancy progresses. Phenomenological shift. A phenomenological shift means understanding pregnancy from a unique first-person experience, what it actually feels like, which others cannot fully grasp. For example, only the pregnant person can truly experience the physical sensations and emotional changes of carrying a child, while others can only understand it from outside. Since wide epistemic transformation shows the pregnancy creates unique first person knowledge and reshapes values, it naturally leads to epistemic asymmetry, where only pregnant person fully understand the experience and therefore requires epistemic humility, recognizing the limits of outsiders judgment. Epistemic asymmetry and humility. Epistemic asymmetry, there is a difference between insiders who directly experience pregnancy and outsiders like doctors or society who can only understand it from an external perspective. For example, a doctor may know all the medical details of pregnancy but cannot fully understand the emotional and physical experience of actually being pregnant. Epistemic humility, it means recognizing the limits of our knowledge, avoiding moral overconfidence. That is, not assuming we know what is best for others, and practicing experience sensitive reasoning, which is giving importance to the lived experience of the person involved. For example, a doctor or family member may suggest what a pregnant woman should do. Still, instead of imposing their view, they should listen to her unique emotional and personal experience and respect that her perspective carries greater moral value. The purpose of this approach is to maintain respect for the person who is experiencing this situation while at the same time utilizing those who are providing support to the individual. The above mentioned approach sets the stage for final chapter regarding how epistemic authority functions in practice and the conditions whereby outsiders can contribute in a meaningful and constructive manner to the ethical deliberative process. Chapter 3, From Autonomy to Epistemic Authority, Regrounding Pro-Choice Arguments. Bodily autonomy functions as a normative foundation, giving individuals the moral and legal right to control their own bodies and make decisions free from coercion. Thinkers like Peter Singer and Thompson shows that even if another life depends on your body, consent is essential, just as we cannot force someone to donate an organ or undergo surgery without permission. This framework is powerful because it protects individual freedom and simplifies legal reasoning and avoids complex debates about fetal personhood. However, autonomy has limits because it treats decision making as if individuals already have clear, stable preferences, while pregnancy is a transformative process that changes emotions, values, and identity over time. As Paul and Woollard argue, this creates an epistemic gap between the abstract right and the lived experience. For example, a woman may initially view pregnancy as a barrier to her career and decide on abortion, but as the pregnancy progresses, emotional attachment and shifting priorities may lead her to reconsider, showing that her decision is not fixed but evolves through experience. This is where epistemic authority becomes important. It highlights that the pregnant person has unique first person knowledge of this evolving experience, which outsiders cannot fully grasp. Therefore, bodily autonomy provides the right to decide. Epistemic authority explains how and why those decisions are made in real life, making reproductive decisions more complex, personal, and grounded in lived experience. Revised framework. As Woollard explains, this differs from bodily autonomy because it based on knowledge and experience, not just rights. Because, for example, in a high-risk pregnancy, doctors and family may give advice, but only the pregnant person truly understand the physical pain, emotional impact, and personal risk involved. So her perspective carries a special importance. Thus, epistemic authority does not replace autonomy, but it strengthens by grounding decisions in lived experience. The reversed pro-choice framework brings together ideas from Peter Singer, L.A. Paul, and Fiona Woollard to show that abortion cannot be understood through bodily autonomy alone. While autonomy protects the right to make decisions without coercion, pregnancy is also a transformative experience that involves uncertainty, changing values, and involving identity. By adding epistemic authority, the framework recognizes that pregnant person has a unique first person understanding of moral situation. This leads to more balanced view where abortion is seen as morally serious but context dependent, allowing for non-absolute judgment while still respecting the individual's authority, which means that abortion is not seen as always right or always wrong, but depends on the individual's situation and experience. Instead of treating choice as mere preference or raw power, this approach understands it as grounded in experience, meaning, and responsibility, offering a richer, realistic account of reproductive decisions. Objections and replies. First, legal indeterminacy arises because grounding decisions in lived experience seems to make it harder to create fixed universal laws. However, this framework does not reject law but instead support more flexible, context sensitive legal systems that can respond to the moral complexity of pregnancy rather than forcing rigid rules into diverse situations. Imagine two pregnant women seeking abortion for different reasons, one due to serious health risk and another due to sudden emotional distress and life instability. A rigid legal rule might treat both cases the same, but a flexible, experience sensitive approach allows doctor and legal systems to consider their different lived realities rather than forcing one size fits all decision. Second one, the risk of subjectivism suggests that prioritizing the pregnant person's perspective reduces morality to personal opinion, but this misinterprets epistemic authority. It does not mean anything goes, but rather that some morally relevant knowledge is accessible only through lived experience while remaining open to reasoning and evaluation. Suppose a pregnant woman feels unable to continue the pregnancy due to overwhelming anxiety. This is not just random preference or opinion. Her judgment is shaped by her emotional and physical experience. So, epistemic authority means her perspective carries special weight, but it doesn't mean all decisions are automatically right. It involves reflection, reasons, and context. Third, the exclusion of non-pregnant voices erases concern that doctors, partners, or society are ignored. In reality, the framework remains relational by including these perspectives, but assigns greater weight to the pregnant person because they uniquely bear the physical, emotional, and existential dimension. In a high risk pregnancy, doctors may advise termination for medical safety, and family members may express concern or support. Their views matters and inform the situation, but the final decision give more weight to the pregnant person perspective. Conclusion. This dissertation re-examines pro-choice arguments by showing that while bodily autonomy is a crucial normative foundation for protecting individuals from coercion, it is not sufficient on its own to capture the full moral reality of pregnancy. Pregnancy is not merely about control over the body, but a lived, evolving experience that reshapes a person's knowledge, values, and identity. Drawing on transformative experience, the study shows that pregnancy is a wide epistemic transformation that generates new form of understanding unavailable beforehand, while epistemic asymmetry highlights the limits of external perspectives. As a result, moral judgment must include both rights and the first-person knowledge, recognizing that ethical reasoning cannot rely only on abstract principles but must also engage with lived experience. To address these limits, the dissertation develops a revised framework that combines bodily autonomy with epistemic authority. Autonomy secures the right to decide, while epistemic authority grounds the moral significance of that decision in first person experience. Together, they offer a more complete and balanced account of reproductive ethics, avoiding both rigid rule based reasoning and pure subjectivism. This approach shows that just understanding of abortion must listen not only to moral principles but also to the experience of those who live through pregnancy, positioning the pregnant person as the most authoritative interpreter of its meaning while still allowing space for supportive external perspectives. So, the references.